Hello, and welcome to episode 37 of the Knowledge Panel show, where today we'll be discussing what can SEO learn from digital PR. So, I have a brilliant set of panels as always. So we've got Darren, Isa, and Ava. I'm gonna just, Eva, sorry, and try and let them introduce themselves a little bit. So Darren, if we could start with you. Um, who are you? Where do you work? And what brings you onto the podcast?
Yeah, I'm Darren Kingman. I've been doing digital PR and SEO for a long time, over a decade now. So I've worked in-house and agency side, predominantly agency side throughout my career. I was part of the leadership team that built Visible for a couple of years. Left, went freelance. Now started up through digital after getting a bit too busy for little old me. Now I've been running that for 5 years. Brings me on the podcast is that David dropped into my DMs and asked if I wanted to come and talk about SEO and digital PR, and of course, so that's me.
Awesome. Oh, brilliant. Okay, thank you. And Isa?
Yes, hello. I'm Isa. I'm a freelance digital PR strategist. I've also been doing it for quite a long time, 15 years. It worked also agency side and in-house. I've also worked with traditional PR agencies and in-house as well. And yeah, I love all things search and off-page SEO and link building. So yeah, I'm on here to talk about it some more.
Brilliant. And Eva?
Hi, I'm Eva, based up in Newcastle upon Tyne. I work for Evolve Search, and I'm a digital PR consultant. I've been in the industry not as long as Darren and Isa, though, probably around about 5 years, but I had 2 years before that in social media marketing. So a bit of a digital media marketing background for me.
Okay, awesome. So thanks so much, guys. So I'm not in digital PR, so this is going to be a very explorative conversation. I'm really excited to learn from you guys. So just for my benefit, for everyone listening, I guess let's start off with what is digital PR. And then broadly speaking, we'll get into the specifics of it a little bit later, but broadly speaking, what are the principles of digital PR that make it similar to SEO, and why are we talking about it in this podcast? Anyone can jump in.
So I'll start. So digital PR is a function of SEO. Obviously, algorithmically, we're trying to build authority effectively for domains that we work with. And that takes multiple different tactics and techniques in order to accomplish that. But effectively, we're trying to come up with stories and add value to the media. So trying to come up with stories and headlines and data points that journalists can use in their articles. And obviously, we then trying to get a reference back to our clients in a lot of cases, or domains that we're working with, in order to try and climb up those rankings. So obviously, Google will use those authority signals, particularly in more crowded niches, in order to try and let the cream rise to the top. The more that we can do that externally, the more authority that we gain, the more, the higher the rankings we climb effectively. So that's, in my mind, that's digital PR.
Yeah, and just to add to that, I would say digital PR is kind of off the back of PR, public relations. In the beginning, when we sort of realized that doing PR helps SEO, it was called SEO PR, and then it was called online PR. But essentially, if you think about PR in itself, PR is all about brand awareness and driving brand reputation. And Google loves all things about sort of driving brand awareness and reputation. And when you're getting authoritative recommendations from websites that Google sees as kind of credible, that's kind of giving Google the signals that, oh, okay, this brand that's talking about this product or this service actually knows what they're talking about. Therefore, we're going to score them higher in the SERPs, basically, because everyone authoritative is writing about them. So essentially, that's another way of looking at it as well.
I think to add to that, I agree with everything that Darren and Isa have said, that we as digital PRs always have to bear in mind like the relevancy of the publications we are gaining the links in, which is in relation to obviously SEO. All of our content which we have on our site needs to be of topical relevancy, needs to have authoritativeness. So whenever we are working with like journalists, our topics and areas that we talk about has to be in relation to the products or the client site that we are working on as well. So to help with SEO on that side.
Okay, awesome. So it's kind of like I would say what we were talking a little bit beforehand, and you guys made it really clear that actually that digital PR and SEO, they're not very far away from each other at all, because the sort of the end goal is to be seen as an authority by Google, and that's a really good place to start this podcast, I think. So I think the next one we'll go on to, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on, is sort of what are some of the specific techniques and tactics from digital PR that SEO professionals, but now I'm reading it and thinking maybe you consider yourself as an SEO professional, but can they adopt to enhance their search engine ranking? So what are you guys doing really specifically that's actually improving SEO in simple terms?
I'll start. So one of the
Brilliant.
first things that we normally do for like a new client or a client that we already have on board, ready to like review the past work that we've done, we do always tend to do like a competitor link analysis. So we look at the links that our competitors have built, see if there's any gaps in the areas which we haven't built links in, where they're targeting and how are they getting higher in their SERP ranking. And we also look at those like niche sites that we're looking to target. So like I mentioned earlier, to do with like relevancy, with topical relevancy, it makes sense for us to target like for automotive clients, which is what we heavily work with. It makes more sense for us to target sites like Top Gear. I'm going to blab on with like a bunch of different automotive niche sites, which you've probably never heard of, like Auto Evolution and things like that. And so I won't go deep dive into that, but we always try and make it hyper relevant, and it's make sure it targets our client's niche area.
In terms of adding to that, I would also say when you're creating any kind of content on the website, there's kind of two sides to look at it. One is looking at content people are looking for, so you're kind of going by search demand. So as well as doing the sort of backlink analysis, as Eva was saying, you also kind of look at queries and questions sort of audiences in that space are asking that you could then answer with kind of creating relevant content on your site. And then to make that content kind of fly in terms of journalists being interested in it, you need to think about how it fits into a news cycle. So you could create a content that's kind of, evergreen, for example, but to actually get that covered as quickly as possible by journalists, it's quite important to think about how you could add that sort of content or information or expert advice into the sort of news cycle. So if you're, let's say, a finance company or insurance company, you would be jumping on all the stories at the moment about interest rates and the credit crunch crisis and mortgage advice. You'd make sure that all the sort of content you're creating around that is kind of in tune with what the sort of journalists would be wanting from terms of an expert advice, and then that's giving you a higher chance of being covered by those sort of authoritative websites.
Yeah, to build on that, like a way that you can do that as well, more specifically, I suppose, when you're doing reactive, for things called PR requests. So there's a load of platforms out there like Harrow, there's journal requests on Twitter and a bunch of other places, Response Source, where journalists are actively seeking someone who has knowledge on a subject that they're going to be writing about in the next couple of weeks. So anyone can do it. Sign up to those platforms, see where you're an authority, or you can sell yourself as an authority, and then just start responding to those queries. Obviously, very targeted, trying to give them something that they can have as a soundbite, effectively, or a data point, and then you can jump on those reactive opportunities.
That's so interesting. So I'm wondering if you guys could give me a little bit more insight into what a typical digital PR campaign looks like. I mean, I suppose it's probably quite a long process to go from start to finish, but I'm just interested to hear like where you guys start with this. I mean, you say you do a backlink analysis. How are you actually performing these? What's what sort of tips and tricks are you hiding?
For a backlink analysis, we tend to use like Ahrefs, and we also use Majestic to look at the competitor backlinks. With Majestic as well, you can also look at the trust flow authoritativeness, and it also goes down to page categories. So you can have like automotive focused ones, you can have lifestyle shopping focused, kind of, which have an authoritativeness within that sector. So they do break it down, and we do look at those. Yeah. I've lost my train of thought. Sorry.
Well, just to add to that, I think while doing sort of that backlink analysis, something that's really important to look at is maybe looking at a gap in the market. So you could essentially find out where your sort of competitors are getting their links and getting sort of coverage, and look at kind of topics that are being covered widely. And actually, your job as a digital PR is to either come up with a gap of a sort of answering a query that hasn't been answering a question that hasn't been answered yet, or making the content better. So something that's already out there, actually improving it, adding more stats to it, getting more expert opinion on it, and just making it a lot bigger for sort of journalists and media kind of publications to update their data. So a lot of insight goes into sort of a digital PR campaign, because you kind of need to ensure that whatever content or story you're creating is actually going to resonate with the audience, and therefore the journalists writing to the audiences. So yeah, a lot of insight is done like pre-campaign.
Yeah, I'm also like wondering, how in touch do you guys have to be with sort of like the just culture at the time? Like, you must be so aware of news all the time, and it must be quite like a huge part of your job. We're kind of going off piece here, but I just think it's such an interesting part of that. If I was going to have insight from a sort of outsider's perspective, it's a difference between what I would have said an SEO professional, which actually sounds way more boring than what you guys are doing, compared to what you're doing. Is like bringing in culture, bringing in the news, and sort of using that as inspiration to feed into Google and make campaigns interesting. Is that sort of a big part of your job, or?
Aisha was already talking about inflation rates a moment ago, right? I mean, you have to be on the beat of various different topics as well, you know, and different industries. We might have travel clients, you might have automotive clients, like Eva mentioned. You know, your plumbing clients, and everything can feed into those, right? So you have to try and sometimes make a not very sexy industry interesting from a journalist perspective. But as long as you know, you have a sense with the media, you know what a headline looks like, you know what an interesting data point looks like, then you know how to reverse engineer that effectively and try and hunt those down in order to create a story from there. And that's what a digital PR campaign really is you know, you're adding value, you're creating a story, it's storytelling. But like you said, you have to know from the get-go what's interesting and what's not.
And yeah, just to add to that, I think this is where digital PR aligns really well with traditional PR, because when I worked for a sort of traditional PR agency, the first thing they would do in the morning is look at the sort of newspapers, look at the magazines, what stories have been written out, what topics out there, what's any queries that we could answer. So let's say there was a thing that said, you know, 1 in 3 people living in Devon are single. Let's just, like, as an example, and let's say one of the clients I have is a dating website. You would then kind of think, you'd look at a stat, or you'd look at some kind of customer data you have, and then you'd use that to jump on that story to answer that query or answer that problem. I think another thing is, like, looking at social media is super important as well. So going on Twitter, looking at even on sort of TikTok is massive. TikTok is so huge, because you can actually use TikTok trends to the journalist and kind of go, oh, this trend or this style has got 75 million views on TikTok. And that's basically telling the journalist that it's on trend. So really being on the cusp of using sort of social data, even using things like Reddit and places like that, where you could really go in and dig and find out what conversations are going on. It really gives you insight in how to feed it into sort of stories and staying on top. And that's why sort of PRs do the same thing, which is why digital PRs kind of use similar tactics to the sort of traditional PRs.
I was going to say, to add to that, we kind of like predict what's going to happen. So obviously it's the summer months now. We know always that every summer we've got this massive heat wave. All of our clients could potentially comment on, in some way or another, on the massive heat wave. And we know it's coming, so all we need to do is get those expert comments, get those expert tips ready, and just ready for outreach, along with like a media list built of like contacts for journalists that we want to pitch the idea to. And we just always know that these things are coming around, like the budget decisions from the government, and like winter's always coming, Christmas is always coming, like those key dates on your like awareness calendar are always going to be there. And if you've always got the campaigns and the comments which can tie into those, it means that you can be reactive faster. It means you can jump on opportunities there as well.
Just I don't know what you guys call that, but we kind of comically call that proactive reactive. It's like, it's coming up, it's reactive opportunity, right? But there are loads of events throughout the year, like you said, that you can always jump on. But yeah, that's what we call it internally. But I don't know if that's going to become a thing.
That's so cool. So it's kind of like trends. So like I suppose my next question was going to be about how it's different to traditional SEO, or the sort of the boring analytics side that we think of. I'm just thinking in terms of how similar it is. It's kind of like the trends. I know that SEOs are obsessed with trends, what's doing well at the time, but I think it's nice to sort of learn from digital PR in the sense that you actually can use being alive as part of your research and being like part of the world. And I'm just wondering if you guys have any more differences of SEO traditional and digital PR in terms of how you approach something, apart from
I
the
think
trend setting and the trends.
I think one way to look at it in terms of SEO as a whole is you just think about three pillars, and you've got like three sisters, and they can't function without each other. So you've got sort of like the technical side, which is basically essentially like if your website isn't set up in a way that Google can't find it, can't crawl it, can't sort of label it, then forget it. Or if your page is slow, so if someone comes into your website and the page loading is taking its time, all these kind of things are the technical side of SEO, which is super important. Which I would say what you're saying, Genie, is probably the more technical side of things. Then you've got content, so you've got on-page content, and that's essentially super important, not just for sort of media outreach. You need to have really relevant and what we call EAT content, authoritative content on the website that's relevant to your service, to your brand. You're offering consumers something, and you've got some sort of long tail, so people are actually going to be searching for the stuff that you write about. So actually a lot of the time you can actually drive traffic to your website just with the content alone, if you're creating relevant, authoritative, credible content that people kind of want to know about. Then the third side of it is obviously the sort of the digital PR. So essentially you've got your technical side, it's sorted out, then you've got the content on site, and then for the digital PR is essentially making sure that Google knows that other people are kind of recommending your website and coming back to you and linking to you and actually sort of referencing you as a site to say, oh, you want to know about this topic, you need to kind of click on this because this company website is as an authority in this space. And that's what gives Google to trust you to kind of get you up in the sort of SERPs higher than your competitors. So that's kind of a way of explaining how it all works together.
Sorry, anybody else?
100%. I've never heard them called three sisters before. I see them as pillars, but exactly the same. And I think you see that on every agency's website, right? There's normally those free services that we offer. Tech SEO, obviously you need it, efficient, for crawlers, for Google and so on and so forth. Digital PR kind of feels like the lever that you can push up or down a little bit more, and it depends on the industry that you're in, right? If you're in a really crowded space, you need more authority signals in order to rise to the top. And if you're in a space more kind of local SEO wise, you don't need as many signals externally in order to rise up. So the other two, I suppose every domain pretty much needs good content. You need the best, kind of 10x stuff, and technically you need to be efficient. But digital PR feels like that lever that can go up or down.
It's awesome. Okay, so if we go on to the next question, which is to sort of be around influencer marketing and to get your insight into that. Actually, personally, I mean, from trying to sort of grow InLinks behind the scenes and stuff, we've been sort of contemplating sort of approach to influencer marketing. And actually, just for me and insights there, what has been your experience with influencer marketing? Is it a completely integral part? I mean, I know Isa was talking about TikTok and how I know that is quite literally just influencer everything. What is that? What kind of role does that play in digital PR?
So I worked with influencers when they were called bloggers. This is a very, very long time ago. And before you had any sort of Instagram, oh God, really giving away how long we're doing this. Before you had Instagram or anything like that, bloggers used to have blogs. So essentially they were small publishers of small websites, magazines. They're still around, but obviously TikTok and sort of Instagram has taken over. So when we used to work with bloggers, we would essentially work with bloggers the same way we would work with a magazine or a publication in a newspaper. So we would engage with them slightly different because obviously they're more kind of an ambassador. So like where I worked with fashion brands or beauty brands, you would kind of send them a product and they would review it, or you would invite them to an event and they would then write about it and review it. Then somewhere down the line, Google's guidelines sort of said you can't really give someone a product to then include a backlink. So Google kind of said that's a no-no. So working with influencers in the SEO space dramatically changed because essentially you can't really get a link for giving someone a product. However, working with influencers as a social signal is massive. And actually a lot of the time they drive trends. So if you see, I think, a case study, for example, could be like those clogs? Is it Crocs they're called? Is it Crocs? All of a sudden, they were something that my dad would wear like 6 years ago. And now every influencer and everyone on Love Island is like wearing them. I'm absolutely positive. Oh, there you go. I'm absolutely positive a huge part of that marketing strategy was working with influencers. And I think, and this is where like Google needs to catch up with social, because where everyone, if something's got 75, 80 million views on TikTok or on Instagram, Google has to pay attention to that, because that's telling it that, okay, this is the trend that's popular. So actually aligning with influencers is part of the SEO strategy as part of brand awareness and sort of driving social signals, even though the sort of link quality isn't exactly giving direct SEO value. It is a massive part of like spreading and kind of making it go viral, for instance. So I would say it's super important for influencer marketing to be part of your digital PR, but from a sort of link building perspective, I'd say it's more second, third kind of priority than just like working with journalists. My take on it anyway.
I think that's the absolute key, right? Is that if you're working with anything that's paid, trying to get a link is the no-no. But I 100% agree with you, and I've been thinking for years that Google should be using more social signals in the way that they try and rank websites against each other, right? Because something could go massively viral socially, not generate many articles and links, and you have nothing to show from it from an SEO perspective. So for that reason, really, we don't really work with influencers in the campaigns that we do. I did about 8 years ago. I did one with James Khan from Dragon's Den, and that just completely bombed and was surprisingly expensive. So we've shied away from doing anything in that direction. More for us, it's about kind of, I suppose, working with authorities rather than influencers. It's trying to have someone, like I mentioned earlier with PR requests, trying to have someone that is worth listening to. So if we're doing a campaign, someone that's relevant to that campaign that can add to it. So it's not an influencer that's going to, from Love Island or something that's going to kind of blow it up socially, but someone that can be referenced and give a journalist a bit more to write about in their articles.
To add to that, in terms of like influence marketing, we sometimes use micro influencers for our campaigns. So we have like a bathroom and shower client, and there was this micro influencer that redecorated their bathroom to look really jazzy, bright colors, all of those like totally different to what you would normally see in the regular everyday trends. And we sometimes utilize their kind of wanting of building a social media following to offer them free press, essentially, to like say that they have done this, and our client would offer expert tips on how someone else could do this, how it's recreated, their expert advice on like recreating this bathroom, and then like maybe some financy angle of like how much it costed that person to do that at home. Just makes it kind of like a real life case study. So whenever a journalist sees it, they're like, oh, someone can relate to that directly. If someone wants to try do it themselves, I've got these great tips from this expert who can do this. And then they publish it. So like that's a kind of a semi way that we work with influencers, is through micro influencers who have started a trend or who've jumped on a trend, and we use them as a case study within our campaigns.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point, Eva. Like, I think one way that we work with influencers is using them as content creators. So like for a client that I worked on a little while ago, they're kind of, let's say they're a competitor to delivery, a sort of delivery service. And essentially they worked with parenting bloggers over the summer and sort of sent them a whole bunch of like grocery stuff to come up with games that you could create at home with your kids. So we sent them a whole bunch of stuff and then we created it with them, and then they sort of wrote about it, and then we then created the whole kind of content on the website to kind of say this is like how you can this parenting blogger did this parenting blogger did that. So you've got on you know, one stage you've got the content, and two stage you've got the parenting influencers sort of pushing it themselves on their kind of channel. So that's kind of giving it that bit of growth. And then you can package it up, as Eva was saying, and sort of sell it in nearly like a case study to journalists kind of going, oh, these parenting influencers put these kind of things together and created this games that you could create for your kids at home. And then you could top it off with some expert advice in there to kind of give it that extra credibility. So yeah, influencers are great for content creation and content collaboration as well.
That's so interesting. So, I guess my next question, as someone who is completely out of this space or feels it at least, how are you tracking this? How are you tracking your success with influencer marketing? Is there like a specific thing, numbers that you're trying to reach, or is it very much just the success of the product that comes out of it? If you see what I think, see what I mean. Does it make sense, or do I need to clarify a little bit more? Okay.
No, I would say from us with our micro influencer ones, we just see it as like a typical PR link building campaign. Just basically how much coverage have we gained, which publications we've gained that coverage within, what links we've built, whether it's had like a category page link focus for that campaign or a specific blog page. We just like track all of like the analytics side of that.
Sometimes what you do as well, we benchmark to see if any keywords are visible within Google. So sometimes when you do a campaign, obviously you've always got category keywords that you're trying to get to the top of Google for your website. But then what you do before a campaign is you sort of benchmark what keywords are showing, and then after the kind of campaign, sometimes some keywords show up because of that kind of the brand awareness and kind of viral kind of campaign. You see yourself ranking for some terms based around the campaign that you've done with influencers.
And then how can you, oh sorry Darren, go ahead.
Sorry. Yeah, there's also social shares, you know, that kind of engagement. BuzzSumo, classic, right, for measuring your impact socially. It's not so much from an SEO perspective, but if you're sending over a deck or doing a presentation that, you know, the C-suite might want to look at and kind of try and ascertain how much value you're offering their company, sometimes you can have eyeballs and reach. You know, here's how much exposure our campaign has generated for you. So sometimes we do put that in there. Not so much recently. It's something we did a while back, but that can also be something worth sharing with clients.
That's so. If we take those things that you guys were all talking about in terms of the different success measurements and stuff, the data that you grab, what do you think traditional SEOs can learn from this? How can they make decisions from the success that comes out of digital PR campaigns?
It's so funny actually, because I actually did the talk on this at Brighton SEO last.
Brilliant.
Yeah, I did. So essentially there's two sides of it. For when you've got the SEO department, quite rightly so, it's looking at keywords, organic traffic, branded traffic, and looking at all that stuff. Whereas from a PR point of view, it's the more qualitative stuff that Eva was just talking about and Dan was just talking about. So you've got like reach, engagement, how many times your brand has been mentioned, sometimes following. If you kind of track how many followers you've got before campaign, then post campaign, you can track that as well. You could also track brand sentiment. So sometimes you could actually have people in comments going, oh, I didn't know about this product before, I'm going to go off and buy it. That's actually telling your client or your sort of stakeholders that this campaign is actually converted customers, or kind of, you know, got customers thinking about, you know, stuff like time spent on site as well. So obviously if you've done a campaign and you've created a page around it and people are going to that page and spending time on that page, that's showing that there's engagement and interest in that campaign. So there's kind of the sort of SEO sort of KPIs that you report on, but then there's also the PR social metrics that you can report on as well.
Yeah, from an SEO's perspective, obviously it comes to, like I said, it comes down to keywords. What impact are you having on the SERPs? And reverse engineering that again from an SEO's side, if they know that there are products or collection pages or topical keywords or keyword groups that they're trying to rank for, a lot of the time you can measure yourself against the top 3, top 5, top 10 ranking competitors and see how close are you from a link equity standpoint. We use TrustFlow for that because it isolates link equity. So if you're benchmarking yourself and looking through your website to see where are the opportunities, you can then start to decide where your link building campaigns or your digital PR campaigns should be focused. So that could be on, your luggage products, for instance, and therefore you might want to do something around luggage or travel. And then you create your digital PR campaign, create your landing page, funnel the equity through to your money pages effectively, and then measure keyword performance. So that's something that's kind of bread and butter. That's something most clients really care about.
Every now and then you could also track sales, not always, but sometimes you can track sales. So a client I worked with before, they worked with a beauty brand and they kind of did the whole sort of product placement of it. And then they looked at the Google Analytics in the back end, and actually sales went up as the coverage went up. So sometimes you can also track sales, not all the time, but sometimes you can track sales as well.
And do you guys ever face any sort of difficulties when it comes to communicating with SEOs? I mean, it's in the nicest possible way, but I know that a lot of SEOs can be quite difficult to sort of reason with sometimes, especially the tech ones that are very much like, we need to label this right. It needs this, maybe digital PR isn't going to help this. So I was wondering if you guys have any, I mean, it would be unfortunate if you did, but any firsthand experience of how communicating with your SEO team or the dedicated SEO space, how that's been difficult. And I guess what I'm looking for is a sort of takeaway that SEOs, something that SEOs can take away from that to sort of improve communication with the digital PR team, for the purpose of the podcast.
I mean, I wouldn't say necessarily difficult conversation. I think from my experience, there's always a kind of difference in terms of the amount of links that you're supposed to get as a digital PR. So with the SEO mindset, a lot of it is about volume. We want to get 25, 30, 60, 80 links in a certain amount of time. And obviously with digital PR, it's like branded quality content stuff, and you can't sort of you can't get that volume all the time. You can get viral campaigns and that happens, but not all the time. So I think it's kind of reasoning with link quality as opposed to link quantity. Sometimes it isn't about the number of links you get, sometimes it's actually the relevant value of the links you have. So my kind of thing is always sort of talking, negotiating with actually, and the proof in the pudding as well. Sometimes having a few links can actually make a difference rather than having hundreds and hundreds of links, because the quality of the links are better. So I think that sometimes people, some SEOs with that sort of volume mindset are kind of, you have got to do a little bit of negotiating.
Another side of that is how quickly you can build links too. Digital PR campaigns, good digital PR campaigns, the methodologies are quite extensive. Like a production typically for us can take 6 to 8 weeks. So if you're starting with someone, or an SEO team comes to you and says, we want to move traffic or rankings for these keywords, and then kind of go, it can take a while. You can use different tactics to try and speed things up. PR requests can be relatively quick. You can start that, and in 2 weeks or so you're driving links. You can do reactive stuff like we spoke about earlier, which can be very quick. But if you're doing a much bigger campaign that's obviously going to be topically relevant and so on and so forth, and offers something new for journalists to feature, that can take you quite a long time. And then it's trying to kind of get the snowball going from there and kind of maintain momentum, right? But it can get a little bit frosty in that first 2 months or so, where you're trying to get things going, but it does take time.
To add to that is that even after all of our hard work, sometimes they try to disavow the link. So there might be a link in a publication which is quite relevant for us as PRs, and we know it's like a good link, and we know it's very relevant to the client, but from a technical SEO point of view, they might have never heard of the website before, and they might want to disavow the link without even thinking twice about it. And so what we tend to do is we have our technical SEOs send us the links that they might potentially want to disavow, and then we just like double check and sense check the list and make sure none of those hard to get in publications are ever disavowed from the site.
On that as well, sometimes SEOs do think you have control over every link that or every placement that you land as well, or sometimes asking you to update the anchor text and things like that, and that is absolutely not how this works. You know, or you'll get your campaign will, fingers crossed, go very well and become viral, and then it's, well, why did you build a link in that publication? It's like, I didn't aim for that. It was just completely viral or picked up naturally, which is what you want. But there can be a little bit of a disconnect sometimes in the success that you're having and how that's actually came about.
And then I think, just to add to that, I think sometimes tech SEOs don't get the brand side of things. So digital PRs, we have to work with a brand team, sort of PR team, especially if you're working for a sort of bigger company, and there's loads of sign-off process that needs to go to make sure your tone of voice is on brand, the assets that you're sending is on brand. And sometimes SEOs don't know or don't really care about any of that, and kind of they just want the link, and actually you've got to be like, no, this has actually got to be very on brand for what we're doing. It's got to make sense for the client. It's got to be something that if you kind of show it, so show that reporting to stakeholders in the whole company that they're happy with everything. So from the link to the link quality to the coverage to the tone of voice to the messaging, it's all got to be right. And that's why I think digital PRs, we sit in that middle, because we get both. We understand the sort of the SEO kind of need for why we need to do certain campaigns, but we also understand the brand PR, brand awareness type of thing. So we're always trying to make sure that we kind of please both sides.
Yeah, I guess also from like exactly what you're saying, from an SEO perspective, it's sort of what content can we put out on our own website right now that's gonna cause some buzz. But what you guys are thinking of is actually the outward world, trying to get buzz into the brand and improve it. And I mean, authority seems to be like the key word that's been, because I know from being an entity SEO and doing all of this, is that SEOs are getting there slowly but surely, and figuring out that you need to talk around concepts, and you need to cover a lot of ground, even if it doesn't feel directly related, even if it isn't targeting that one long tail keyword, but it has something behind it, has intent, like user intent or buyer's intent behind it. It's almost just as valuable, if not more valuable, to Google than just matching a exact match anchor text. So I think from what I've learned from you guys is really quite similar. And I think we could all learn a lot from each other, and I've certainly learned a lot from you guys. I'd love to finish sort of on a any sort of success story. So I know it doesn't have to be sort of branded. I'm just wondering if you guys have any um, stories to share that you're quite proud of, maybe some campaigns that went well in terms of the decisions you decided to make, and stuff that resulted in significant improvements in search rankings and brand visibility or organic traffic, or even none of those things, but you learn a lot from it. I'd love to hear anything like that if you're willing to share as sort of closing comments.
I don't know how much you guys can share as well, but NDAs and all that kind of stuff, right? But
Yeah,
from my perspective, I suppose there's quite a few. So it's hard to select, like case study wise, which one. But I think, like Eva mentioned earlier, not only authority but relevance is a key part of what we need to do in order to move the needle from an SEO perspective. One that we did a couple of months ago, or just at the tail end of last year, it was called the Paris Syndrome. For anyone that didn't see it, it was a piece where we found out there was a very real medical condition called the Paris Syndrome, where people become sick after visiting Paris because of how disappointed they feel of the reality of the city. So that was immediately like sparked wildfire in our brainstorming session because it was so interesting. So we pivoted that to look at the most disappointing cities around the world, which is more of a negative spin on travel. But thankfully, we didn't have a client that was trying to drive more interest in holidays. They already had a service they were trying to provide in different cities. So we used that. Built on it. It was Orlando that came out top, I suppose, because it's expensive. Families go there. It's tiring. Who knows? But that came out top. We reviewed, I think it was 800,000 reviews, and we used sentiment analysis to try and understand positive, negative, like Isa mentioned earlier, as well. And the result, although we did a bunch of campaigns across the domain, and they had an uplift anyway, they were up 80% year on year for organic clicks. Across all Paris keywords and related content, they were up 160%. So you can see how not only does it have a positive effect for pretty much everything across the domain, it can seep through into keyword specific queries as well that are related to the campaigns that you're doing. So yeah, that's one that I thought worth talking about.
That's absolutely worth talking about. I think that's a really perfect example of the sort of fusion of SEO and digital PR and how they are really not that far apart. And the sooner we start thinking about them together, the sort of more successful overall this sort of search for online visibility will become. So thank you so much, guys. I mean, do you guys, Isa and Eva, do you have any closing comments? Just so it could be about literally anything to sum up what we've talked about over here. Maybe just some closing comments on what can SEOs really learn from digital PR, just to finish us off.
I mean, I would actually sort of say it the other way around, because I think SEOs, because digital PRs are in the SEO space, we are kind of essentially SEOs. I would say it's actually what PR, traditional PRs can do more with SEO, because it feels like it's kind of a waste of budget when PR agencies or PR departments go off and do their own thing without thinking about SEO. I've come across that a lot. And actually, if traditional PRs learn about SEO and learn about the benefit of SEO, companies could be really, really like using their budget more efficiently. So for example, if they did a survey story and then the survey story did really well, then that's it. It's kind of dead. Where instead of putting that survey story on a website and then asking journalists to link to that story, you're then getting links at the same time as well, getting that brand awareness. So I'd say I think it's more about PRs kind of going into the SEO space. I think with SEOs it's more about thinking about being on brand and just thinking about tone of voice and thinking about the client or the sort of company service and sort of end goal, rather than just thinking about the link and visibility, because it's all in one. It's all kind of holistically needs to work together.
Awesome. Eva?
Quality over quantity, always, and relevancy. So make sure whatever campaign you're putting out there, whatever link you're trying to get the campaign to link to, is relevant to your campaign, because it just makes sense.
Yeah, it makes sense to me. Okay, brilliant. Thank you for coming on to the podcast, guys. I'm going to quickly bring in David to explain next week's podcast. Hi, David.
Next month's podcast. Yeah, indeed. Yeah, absolutely. Great episode there. So next month is going to be episode 38. That's going to be on the 21st of August, which is going to be how to build an SEO-friendly content marketing strategy. I've got 4 great guests booked for that one. Chima Meji, Edward Zubrinski, Martin Hunchbatch, and Holly Cartledge. Find out more about that at theknowledgepanelshow.com. It'll be distributed to all the popular platforms, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and more.
Brilliant. And all that's left to say is thank you so much, guys, for coming onto the podcast. And I hope to see you all again really soon.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.